Добрий день, я вітаю всіх.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Oleh, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Ukraine Media Center today. Today we have invited you to discuss quite an important topic. Today we are going to discuss the situation in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, the blackout. We'll discuss the situation for the time being, and definitely we'll discuss the potential consequences for Ukraine and Europe. A little bit of background information on the 23rd of September, blackout has taken place in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The last line was disconnected that was feeding the occupied nuclear power plant from the Ukrainian grid. President Zelensky called that situation critical, and this is how he evaluated the situation with his Russian occupation of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. We'll discuss it in deeper detail. Joining us in the studio is Oleh Korikov, the head of Укрдержатомрегулювання, Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine, and Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety. So thank you for joining us today. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. The first question is about the situation. What do we have for the time being in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant? Thank you for your question. Currently, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is under occupation of Russian troops. And starting from the 23rd of September, it's been day 9 that the nuclear power plant is disconnected from the grid. The 750 kilovolt line was damaged. The place of damage was in the area of Zaporizhia thermal power plant, the left bank of Dnipro River, the territory under temporary occupation of Russian troops. Electric power for proper operation of the security systems and other systems important for the safe operation of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, starting from the moment of damage of the 750 kilovolt line, was backed up by the diesel generators. In this situation, we're talking about the ionized nuclear fuel that is in all of the 6 reactors of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and the measures should be taken to withdraw excessive heat in the reactors. We classify the situation as an emergency situation that did not result in emergency. However, there is a potential for such transformation still preserved unless there are relevant measures taken. First of all, it's about the emergency reestablishment of the external power supply. So this emergency situation is an apparent consequence of occupation of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and ignoring by the Russian occupiers of the requirements and principles of the radiation and nuclear safety and security. Shellings exercised by the Russian Federation, of the aerial lines and their intentional damage, as well as intentional obstacles created on the way of reestablishment of power supply to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. As an example, we may say that on the 7th of May, the backup line of power supply was damaged with a capacity of 330 kilovolt, and the consumption in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was going through only one line, 750 kilovolt, the Dniprovska line. And again, let me remind you that on the 4th of July, there was already an episode of blackout in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant because the Dniprovska line was disconnected. However, the Ukrainian specialists were able to reestablish the power supply within hours. So basically, the situation when there is only one power supply line available is already a threat of itself from the perspective of nuclear and radiation safety and security. We've communicated those facts, and we were trying to draw the attention of the interested parties in including IAEA. We've communicated this information in different formats, including during our meetings with the Director General of IAEA a couple of weeks ago. During the meeting of the management board of IAEA, I was meeting Mr. Grossi personally, and I drew his attention to those facts. We've emphasized the impossibility to reestablish the power supply through 330 kilowatt line because the place of damage is under constant shelling by the Russian troops. And my goal was to have 2 lines of power supply established, and I'm confident that Mr. Grossi understands it, and he uses his best efforts to solve this problem or to help in reestablishment of the backup power supply. However, it's apparent that for the occupiers, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant became a tool of a nuclear blackmailing of all of the world, and they did not only not reestablish the backup power supply line, but also damaged the main line, the Dniprovska line, and currently Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is in the mode of full loss of external power supply. So basically in the condition of emergency. And with the beginning of occupation, let me remind you, with the beginning of the blackout, 9 days ago, the occupiers were saying that the amount of diesel fuel that is being consumed by backup diesel power generators will be sufficient for 10 days, according to the standards. Let me remind you, we have 18 backup diesel generators, plus 6 mobile diesel pump stations and generators. And also we have information that the occupiers consume the emergency supply of fuel, not only using those backup diesel generators, but also other devices such as diesel boilers for heating water. They fuel their material using the diesel fuel, so we don't know how long is this fuel reserve going to suffice. And again, the diesel fuel was being consumed for the last 9 days, and hence the question, how soon is it going to run out? And summarizing the situation, I would say that the loss of the external power supply line is yet another example of the fashion in which Russia destroys the principles of the safe and secure operation of nuclear facilities, so-called 7 pillars proclaimed by Mr. Rafael Grossi, based on the internationally recognized safety and security principles of operation. So all of the principles are ruined. Again, let me remind you, the personnel keeps working under pressure, radiation monitoring and data transfer is absent. Physical consistency of parts and components is still under question because there are military material and ammunition staying in the facilities of nuclear power plant. The supply of spare parts was interrupted too, which is another alarming issue, and it's again an example of the irresponsible operation of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant by Russia. Okay, so do we understand it correctly that currently we cannot even be confident about the period within which the system is going to last because we don't have the understanding of the big picture? Well, Currently, we have information from Zaporizhia nuclear power plant coming in very small doses, and the occupiers who continue maintaining the situation in such a way that we are witnessing the results now. So they keep informing IAEA, well, sometimes in a very distorted fashion. So there is no trust to that information, and it seems like the standards are being complied with. However, in reality, they may not be complied with, and there is no way to find confirmation or proof, because the occupiers restrict access of IAEA representatives to the components which are critical for the safe and secure operation of the nuclear facility, and they provide the access sometimes in not timely manners, so we definitely cannot trust that information. Are there currently representatives of IAEA in the facilities of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant? Yes, the IAEA missions are present in all of the nuclear power plants in Ukraine without exclusion, including Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and including Chernobyl nuclear power plant and Chernobyl exclusion zone. There is an extended mission working there. In Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, we get information from IAEA on a regular basis. According to the information from IAEA, currently there are 8 reserve diesel generators in operation, and the supply of the cooled water is performed to the cooling systems, and the temperature of nuclear radioactive fuel inside the reactors is within the standards. Well, I would like to ask you about the potential consequences for the world. Director General of IAEA, Rafael Grossi, mentioned that from the safety perspective, the situation is unstable. If all of the systems go off, there is a threat of fusion of radioactive fuels. So is there really such a threat, and what does it mean for us? What will be the consequences? Well, basically now the safety systems that are being fed by that electric power generated by diesel generators, those safety systems, they support the reactor in an interrupted operation, which means they withdraw the excessive heat in order to ensure the consistency of the radioactive fuel. As soon as those systems will lose power supply and will be no longer able to operate, the temperature of water in the reactors will start growing, and after the achievement of the temperature of 100 degrees centigrade, the water will be transforming into the steam, and the level of water will respectively fall in the reactor, which may result in overheating of the fuel due to the growth of its temperature. The shell of the fuel may be ruined under such conditions, so the shell of the fuel will lose or may lose its consistency, because sometimes the temperature grows over 1000 degrees centigrade, which may result in the evaporation of radioactive products beyond the shell of the reactor, and then the temperature will continue growing, and that radioactive products may evaporate outside the reactor and outside the area of the nuclear facility, Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. This is what Mr. Grossi means, and this is why we need to ensure the safe operation of the safety systems. That's the basic safety principle, and we have to immediately, all together, using joint efforts, to reestablish power supply from the Ukrainian power grid. In fact, one of the tasks of the IAEA mission, including the one working in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, according to the documents entered into between Ukraine and IAEA, which contemplate the permanent staying of the IAEA representatives in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. So currently the potential emergency is very brightly visible. Such scenario is very clearly outlined, and the task of IAEA, their head office, and all of the stakeholders interested in this process is to prevent any emergency, and thus to reestablish the power supply. Talking about final condition when Zaporizhia nuclear power plant will be able to reestablish safe and secure operation in full, it may only happen when Ukraine will regain institutional control, when Ukraine's legit operator will gain control over the nuclear facility, over the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Mr. Oleh, do you connect the loss of power supply of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant with Russia's desire to have it connected to their power grid? Thank you for the question. Well, it's difficult to comment about the intentions of the occupiers because they were never hiding it that the long-term goal is the integration of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant into the Russian grid. However, for the time being, Ukrainian power grid until recently was supplying electric power to Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and this situation should be reestablished. We can do it quickly, and we may ensure a quality supply of electric power. Are you witnessing any specific steps on part of our partners like European Union or other international partners? And if so, what are such steps? Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, it's about the pressure. It's about reiterating their position. In that sense, we're enjoying full support of our partners. They recognize Zaporizhia nuclear power plant as a Ukrainian facility that should be connected to the Ukrainian power grid, and this is how it should remain connected, and the reestablishment of safety and security may only happen in case Ukraine regains control over the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Talking about the situation for the moment, the situation with interruption of power supply, well, the way that our partners may influence is exercising pressure over Russia and also support of Ukrainian power grid, because currently it suffers a certain amount of damage because Russia keeps inflicting attacks, keeps inflicting drone and missile strikes on our energy infrastructure. So there is a very big window for such support and help on part of international partners. Well, there is an idea among the in the expert communities that Russia needs Zaporizhia nuclear power plant not like an energy facility, but rather as a tool of blackmailing, a method to threaten us and to keep control over the situation to a certain extent. Well, do you agree? Well, I agree because we see that this is the way it happens. It's year 4 already that Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is staying under occupation. We see the way that the safety and security degrades, and we're witnessing the growth of potential, growth of probability of emergency. We see that Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is transformed into a military base. There was material arms and explosives identified there. There were explosives installed in excess of IAEA representatives is restricted or provided in untimely manner. Also, let me remind you, there was a cooling tower that was burnt. Then there were a number of cases of fires in the area of nuclear power plant. Also, the personnel is not sufficient because it's really difficult to operate there. Ukrainian personnel has lost access to Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and Russian occupiers are unable to find other personnel due to the risks. So we're witnessing a lot of risks that we were discussing, and Russia, in our opinion, is only holding on to that facility because they want to blackmail the rest of the world by their military presence in Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and also because of the presence of nuclear material in the power plant, and they try to cover themselves with the territory of a nuclear facility. Well, do we understand it correctly that at any moment we are ready to reestablish such power supply should the access be provided, and how long may it take us? Well, the 750 kilovolt line, the Dniprovska line, is ruined on the bank that is currently under control of the occupational forces. And honestly, I'm not an expert when it comes to reestablishment of power supply lines. You better ask the power technicians, but to the best of our understanding, the period of works would probably be 1 to 2 days. And the same situation is on the bank under Ukrainian control, the 330 kilovolt line. Those, for what I understand, according to the information they have from the specialists, it's about 1 to 2 days. Thank you for the information. Well, just recently, Russians inflicted another strike on the city of Slavutich using their Shahed drones. As a result, the city was staying without power supply and water supply. In the morning, the power technicians have reported that they've made it reestablishing the power supply of Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So what is the situation over there? What are the consequences that you may predict or contemplate? Well, currently, Chernobyl nuclear power plant is being decommissioned. The ruined reactor number 4 is currently under the safe confinement. Let me remind you that the new safe confinement was damaged as a result of a Russian drone strike in February this year, and now there are works underway on temporary isolation of that orifice that resulted from the drone strike. Also, we have 2 more facilities for the preservation of the processed nuclear fuel, a dry type and a pool type. There are 2 types of storages. So the loss of power supply, it may result in disconnection of the new safe confinement. Then, as a result of the drone strike, the confinement was operated with restrictions, and there were no works using any lifting equipment because it was damaged. The ventilation systems also cannot operate according to the standards. So there was a power shutdown. The backup diesel generators switched in, and then after reestablishment of power supply, the diesel generators were disconnected. But again, that was a locked event, a locked emergency, and now the investigation is underway. What I can say is that it's absolutely unacceptable when the facilities are being attacked that may cause influence on the safety and security of operation of the nuclear facilities, and we cooperate with IAEA in that area too. There is an analytical mission of IAEA currently working to identify the algorithms, how to identify the critical power supply facilities or critical installations in the power grid. And respectively, we are going to have all grounds to protect critical power substations, just as we do with the nuclear power facilities. Well, we understand that the aggressor country, those who inflict such strikes, they understand what they're doing, they know what they target, and they understand that their targets are the nuclear facilities, and any such shellings, any such strikes may result in consequences. Talking about consequences, what can be the consequences of drone strikes on our Chernobyl nuclear power plant? Well, look, in Chernobyl nuclear power plant that is currently being decommissioned, there are 2 reactors and the new safe confinement. I may say that IAEA and other stakeholders agree with me that it's unacceptable, and the strikes on such infrastructure has nothing to do with nuclear and radiation safety and security. It's in contradiction with the fundamental approaches to the safety and security, to the safe operation of the nuclear facilities, and such activities should be ceased. And in fact, they should have never even started. That's my perspective of the nuclear safety and security regulator. Thank you, dear colleagues. If you have any questions, you have an opportunity to ask them now. Now that we don't have any questions on the floor, I would like to thank you for this broadcast. Thank you for joining us and providing information on a present topic. Thank you very much. Let me remind you that joining us was Oleh Korikov, head of the Ukraine State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate and Chief State Inspector for Nuclear and Radiation Safety. And I would like to thank our security and defense forces for an opportunity to hold events like this. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.